Okay, now we will start session 4, which we are going to look at Daniel, and we're going to look at the Hebrew boys of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, before we start reading from the scripture, there is something I need you to understand. And the thing that we need to understand is that it was the Father's will. The Father had decreed, the Father had spoken by the mouth of the prophet Jeremiah that they were going to go into Babylon for 70 years because the land was going to rest, because they did not keep his charge by being able to make sure that they would rest the land when it came to the time of the Shemitah. And therefore, when he did his calculation, 70 years they would go into exile because the land needed to rest for that which they did not do by keeping his Torah ways, in having to keep the Shemitah, which that year of the Shemitah the land is to rest. And they did not do that. So, because of that, it was the Father's will that they were going to go into Babylon. So, at the end of the day, it wasn't going to help Daniel or any of them fight against this, because they had to understand this was all part of the Father's plan. And these are the things that we really need to understand in the times that we're coming into. Because if the Father has said that he's going to hand over for 3.5 years to the beast and to the anti-Messiah that's going to come, if he's going to hand it over for 3.5 years, then we have to understand that we cannot fight against what he's already put in place. The book of Revelation is there, and the book of Daniel is there for us to be able to understand that there are things here that we need to understand. And so, already for me, the book of Daniel is already showing me that there was nothing that they were going to do that was going to change, but they were going to have to stand for what they believed. And it already started right in the beginning, when they were going to come into the palace. And when they came into the palace, that the young men in whom there was no blemish but good looking, from chapter 1, that they didn't want to defile themselves with the food that was going to be given them from the palace. So they took all these good-looking young men, which was Daniel and these Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was with them, and they were going to have to receive 3 years of training. And look at how interesting this is. Verse 8 says, but Daniel laid it upon, chapter 1, verse 8, and Daniel laid it upon his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the sovereign's food, nor with the wine which he drank. So he asked permission for the chief of the eunuch not to defile himself. And Allah granted Daniel loving commitment and compassion from the chief of the eunuchs, because Daniel was willing to stick to the Torah, that's what I just spoke to you earlier when I said to you, when the time comes when we are not going to have food, or when we are going to go into exile, are we going to be able to break his Torah because of our own survival means? Now, yeah, they're going into this place. They're going to have to come under strict discipline in this palace, these eunuchs, that they're now going to have to come under strict orders. But yet Daniel takes a stand and says, please, can you allow us that we will not eat your food? And we don't want to drink your wine, because they didn't want to defile themselves. And look at this. And this, they agreed to it. And I look at verse 14. And he listened to them and in this matter and tried them 10 days. Okay, he said, okay, I will allow you to do this. I will let you do it for 10 days. Now listen. And at the end of the 10 days, their appearances look better and fatter in flesh than the young men who ate the portions of the sovereign's food. So they deprived themselves from being able to eat the food that was being offered them. And they didn't want to eat this food to not defile themselves, because understand, obviously there would have been other delicacies there being offered to them, all the pork and the meat that would not have been, that maybe was offered to idols, whatever it may be, whatever it was, they didn't want to have to eat that food. And it's interesting because Daniel said to the overseer, whom the chief of the eunuchs had set over him, verses 11, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please try your servants for 10 days and let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. You see, they weren't going to drink the wine, they were going to drink water, and they were going to eat the vegetables, but they weren't going to eat the food of the palace. And after 10 days, after eating that food, they were fatter than what they were. So at the end of the day, when we are obedient to the Father, the little bit that He's going to give us, just like that manna that was given from heaven, was able to sustain them. And they were able to do very well with just that manna. They were fed that manna. 40 years in the wilderness, they ate that manna. So I just wanted to start off with that in the book of Daniel, for us to understand that, they went into exile. They were living in a time when they were under the rulership of Babylon. They were in Babylon. They were no longer living in the nice safety of the way that they could keep the Torah ways, but that they were in Babylon. They were in bondage in Babylon as well. And they still were going to adhere to the Father's ways. And this is why I'm saying that this book is so important, because it's a lesson for us in where we are right now. That even though they were in the world, they were in this foreign place, they were raising up to a place of authority. They were raising up to a place of where they were not going to bow down to the regulations. They were not going to assimilate. They would not assimilate, but they would be set apart. And this is the thing, that this order wants to put us into an assimilation, that we assimilate. It's the same as if I go into Israel today, I have to assimilate and conform to their customs and their traditions and their things if I'm going to have to go through a conversion. So if I go through conversion, I have to go through assimilation. And, that's why the Father's never allowed me to really go that way. That's not the route that He ordained for me. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen from today to tomorrow anyway. But anyway, we are going to pick up the story from Daniel chapter 3 from verse 4. Then a herald loudly proclaimed, "To you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that as soon as you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipes, and all kinds of instruments, you shall fall down and do obeisance to the gold image that the sovereign Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and do obeisance is immediately thrown into the midst of the burning furnace of fire. So as soon as all the people had to hear this, they had to throw themselves. Now we get to verse 10. O sovereign, have made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipes, and all kinds of instruments shall fall down and do obeisance to the gold image. And whoever does not fall down is thrown in the midst of the burning fire. There are certain Yehudim, these Jews, these Yehudim, they are the Yehudim, the Hebrews, whom you have set over the work of the province of Babel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, by this time, they've been given their, their names, their Persian names here. These men, O sovereign, pay no heed to you. They do not serve your Elohim, and they are not doing obeisance to the gold image which you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and wrath, gave orders to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the sovereign. So he tells them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my Elohim, and that you do not do obeisance to the gold image which I have set up? Now, if you are ready, when you hear the sound, when you hear the sound of these instruments, that you fall down and do obeisance to the image which I have made, good. But if you do not do obeisance, you are immediately thrown into the midst of the burning furnace of fire. And whom is Elah, who does deliver you out of my hands? And who is the Elah? Which God, which Yahuwah is going to deliver you out of my hands? Now listen. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the sovereign, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. So you see, how are we going to behave in the time that we are coming into now, when we are going to be confronted that we are going to have to take a vaccine maybe, or we're going to have to take a bangle maybe, or we're going to have to take a chip maybe, that we're not going to be able to trade or whatever. And they say, do this or else you are going to die. These are the things that I need you to understand, that just like it was here, we need to understand what is coming in our way. For now listen to what they say. They are in Babylon by the hand of the Father. He's the one who sent them there. They are to stay there for 70 years. And whatever it is, they have to still be obedient to the Father and to his ways. Because they are not eating the king's food, because they will not eat any unclean food. That's why they ate no meat, because the meat still would have had the blood in it, and maybe they would have had unkosher meat, meat that was maybe, that would have been pork and everything else that went with it, or meat that they were not supposed to eat, so they chose to become vegetarian there and then. They said, no, we'll just eat vegetables, thank you. And we do not want your wine, because we are not to drink the wine, because we are priests, and therefore we will not drink wine. And they will drink water. And that even though they were living there, they were still, and they were going to be there for 3 years, but they were going to live this fasted lifestyle for 3 years while they stayed there, because they were not going to conform. And yet the Father made it that they looked fatter and more healthier. That word fatter means healthier than the others. So now listen to what they say. Now, they don't go into a panic. They don't go into fear. They don't go into demanding and commanding and speaking to, rebuking. They don't go into any of that. Now listen to the faith and the trust that they have in the one whom they serve. Listen carefully. O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. Verse 17. For if so, our Elah, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning furnace of fire, and from your hand, O sovereign, he does deliver. Look at how they know who he is. Now, he is able. We know the one whom we serve. He is able to deliver us from this fiery furnace. But listen to what they say. They don't go into major prayer. They don't go into major doing anything. Listen to the faith of these young men, and listen to the allegiance that they pledge to the King of Kings, to ABBA YAWHUAH himself, to the love that they have for their Creator, Abba Father. To the love, to the fact that these are young men that know his ways, that keep his ways, that have had a man like Daniel that was teaching them the ways of ABBA YAWHUAH, that they are still faithful to doing prayers, that they are still faithful to keeping the ways of ABBA YAWHUAH, that even in that palace they were not going to eat that food because they want to be obedient to him and to his ways. Listen. But if not, so now they speak to him straight. They say, listen, understand one thing. In this matter, our Elah, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning furnace of fire, and from your hand, O sovereign, he does deliver. But if not, let it be known to you, O sovereign, that we do not serve your Elohim. We do not serve your gods. We do not serve them. Nor do we do obeisance to the gold image which you have set up. You see when he said, bow down, when Hasatan came to Yahushua saying, bow down, and I give you all these kingdoms. Bow down, and you do obeisance to me. Now, what have these young men been taught? You worship no other God. This is spoken of in Deuteronomy once again when Yahushua was confronted with that which he was told. Once again, he was quoting the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6, when he says, you will bow down to no other Yah, but to Yahuwah himself. That's what he was quoting there and then. Here, I'll read it to you. And it says, you shall worship Yahuwah your Elah, and him alone you shall serve. Deuteronomy 6:13. So if we go to Deuteronomy 6:13, that is exactly what it says. Go to Deuteronomy 6:13. I'm just quickly going to go there because he's telling me, we need to read the scripture because it's the truth that sets us free. Fear Yahuwah your Elah and serve him and swear by his name. So we are to fear Yahuwah and we are to serve him. We are not to bow down to the systems of this world. We are not to pledge allegiance to anything. We are not to be able to receive any mark of anything. We are to be faithful to the Father in the midst of the fiery furnace of what's going to come our way, and where we have to be able to bow down to this beast that's going to come, and the system that it's going to present us, and where we're not going to be able to trade or buy food or do anything if we don't receive this mark of the beast. What are we to do? Listen to it like what they say. He, O sovereign, he does deliver. Sovereign, listen, he's a deliverer. He does deliver. They didn't say they know that he does deliver. They have read the Torah. They have read what has happened with David. What has happened with David and Goliath? They have known that he delivered Goliath into their hands. They have read all of the books of the Torah. They have read through, they know the books of that. They have read all of that. They know. They have read exactly what has happened with David when David stood before Goliath. They have read about Joseph, where Joseph was put in the pit, sold into slavery, but yet at the end of the day, look at how he came. They have heard about all the deliverance. They've read through the whole of the books of the Torah of how the Father, they have heard about Exodus, how he did all the plagues. They know who he is. They know. He does deliver. They know he delivers. This is not a test that they need to worry about whether he's going to deliver them or not. They know that he will deliver. But, listen to what they say, but if not, let it be known to you, O Sovereign, that we do not serve your Elohim. We are not going to serve your gods. Nor do we do obeisance to the gold image which you have set up, because they will not bow to any other god. They only bow to Yahuwah, creator of heaven and earth. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with wrath, and the expression on his face changed towards Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And he responded and gave orders, and they heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usual to heat it. And he commanded some of the strongest men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the burning furnace of fire. Now imagine, he even makes it hotter than what it was. That those men were bound in their coats, their trousers, and their turbans, and their outer garments, and were thrown into the midst of the burning furnace of fire. Thereupon, because the sovereign's order was urgent, and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound into the midst of the burning furnace of fire. Now imagine, they fell in the fire. Then the sovereign Nebuchadnezzar was amazed, and stood up in haste, and spoke and said to his counselors, Did we not throw 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said to the sovereign, Certainly, O sovereign. He answered and said, Look, I see 4 men loose. They were bound, and now they are loose. I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the son of Yahuwah. Wow. Like the son of Yahuwah himself. Now, Yahushua, the one whose deliverance, the one who is the deliverer, he will come and he will deliver. If it is Abba's will that he wants to show a king, and he wants to show everybody the glory of Yahuwah, he will come and deliver. Just like when Yahushua came and he had to be resurrected on the 3rd day. And he was resurrected. Just like when Peter was in the jail and the 2 messengers came to him. And now they came and they broke loose. And there Peter was to be able to go and continue his ministry that the Father had for him to do. So what I'm saying is, for the time that the Father wants, he will do great and mighty signs. If this is what he has decided and what he has planned, he will do. Peter was in jail and he was sleeping. He wasn't out there trying to rebuke and do all these things. He was sleeping. He knew that he knew that he knew the one whom he served, just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego knew that they knew the one whom they served. They were not the slightest bit disturbed. They were not the slightest bit fussed. They didn't care if they were going to die or not, because they were going to die if they needed to die, or else they were going to overcome this thing. They knew that their Father is the deliverer. They knew. And who does the Father send? The Father sends Yahushua himself. Yahushua, our Messiah, is standing there in the midst of the fire with them. delivering them. And listen to verse 29. Therefore, I make a decree. So, from verse 28, and Nebuchadnezzar responded and said, Blessed be the Elah, the Yahuwah of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his messenger and delivered his servants who trusted in him. So you see, if we trust him and we believe in him and we know if he's going to deliver us, he will deliver us. But if not, we are not going to bow down. It's not a case of the fear that we have, that we're going to pray up a storm, that he has to deliver us. It's a case of the faith that we have in him to say, I'm going to be obedient to you no matter what. If I must go to this, if I have to go to this guillotine, and I'm going to have my head chopped off, because I will not take the mark of the beast, then that is exactly what it will be. If my Father wants to deliver me, he's going to deliver me, and I will overcome this, and he will come and he will deliver me. But if not, I'm still not going to take the mark of the beast. That's what it means to overcome. That's what it means, that we are going to overcome unto death, which means that I will, even if I have to suffer, even if I have to die, I will not bow down to the system. I will be faithful to my Father, even unto death. That's what it means. And his servants who trusted in him and changed the sovereign's order and gave up their bodies, and they should not serve nor do obeisance to any Elah except to their own Yahuwah. So they were not going to bow down to any other God except to Yahuwah himself. Therefore I make a decree. Now look at what happens because of their obedience. Now what I say to you is, you see, our obedience, this is what it comes from. See, through your suffering, you become the deliverance for other people. Through your conquering, through your obedience to bowing down to his way, you become a deliverer for those others that need to see him. So in this time ahead of us, it could be that we are going to have to, Father's going to make sure that we're going to be in a place where we are going to be able to speak his word, where we are going to be in a time that it's going to be dangerous, but we are going to be able, and these people are going to look, and we're going to stand by absolute faith, and we are going to do these things, and Abba's going to deliver us, and that's going to be for the deliverance of those to be able to see who he is, and they will believe in him and they will accept him. Just like what happens to Nebuchadnezzar. So here you go. Therefore I make a decree that whoever of any people, nation, language, and who speak any wrong against the Yahuwah of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, his limbs shall be taken, and his house made a dunghill, because there is no other Yahuwah who is able to deliver like this. Then the sovereign promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the province of Babel. So at the end of the day, the Father can turn a situation around so that you become an example for how many people, plus for a king, plus for whatever it is that's coming upon our path we do not know, for people to be able to see him and receive him. We don't know what he's got ahead of us. All I know is, like I've said to you, we've got a great outpouring coming out now at this time of Shavuot, which I truly believe that the Father is going to have to give us his power of the Ruach to have to endure the things that are going to be before us. And we are going to receive his glory in a way that I don't believe is like what people understand. But that those who need to see him are going to see him just like they had to see. Now, in what righteousness did Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walk? In what purity, set-apartness, holiness, obedience to his word did they walk in? So that the glory of Yahuwah could have been seen on how many people that were able to accept him. And this is the kind of thing that I need us to understand. So let us go look at Daniel chapter 6, because we are now going to look at Daniel. So this was now Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So now we're going to look at Daniel. And we're going to look at Daniel from 3 to 10. So from Daniel 6 from 3 to 10. And this Daniel distinguished himself above the governors and viceroys because an excellent spirit was within him. Now that is what we need for ABBA YAWHUAH. We need to be like it was said of Daniel, it must be said of us, like it was with Noah, where it says that Noah was a righteous man, perfect. Noah walked with Yahuwah. He was perfect in his generation, walked with Yahuwah. We covered that in the first session that we did. So Daniel distinguished himself above the governors, the viceroys, because of an excellent spirit was in him. And the sovereign planned to appoint him over all the reign. And the governors and the viceroys sought to find occasions against Daniel concerning the reign, but they were unable to find occasion or corruption, because he was steadfast, and no negligence or corruption was found in him. You see, this is a righteous man. This is a man that absolutely walks in the ways of ABBA YAWHUAH, keeps his ways, keeps his charge, is faithful to him no matter what. And to verse 10. So, then these men said, we shall not find any occasion against Daniel unless we find it against him concerning the law of his Yahuwah. So you see, the only way that they can get to us is by getting us to be able to come and not keep his laws, not keep his ways. And so, look at what it says of here. Then those governors and viceroys tumultuously gathered before the sovereign and said this to him, Sovereign Darawish, live forever. All the governors of the reign, the nobles and the viceroys, the counselors and the advisors have consulted together to establish a royal decree and to make a strong interdict that whoever petitions any ilah, any other Yahuwah, any other god, or man for 30 days except you, O sovereign, is thrown into the den of lions. Now, O sovereign, establish the interdict and sign the writing so that it is not to be changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which does not pass away. So you see, this is now a law that's going to get, and all because they are jealous of Daniel, and because they can't find any fault in Daniel, and because they're trying to get rid of Daniel. So the sovereign, Darawish, signed the written interdict. And Daniel, when he knew that the writing was signed, now listen to Daniel, listen to this Daniel. Once again, he's in the dispersion, is living in this land that is outside of the land of where he's supposed to be, but he's going to keep the laws of ABBA YAWHUAH. He's going to keep his Torah even unto death. He doesn't care. So listen. And Daniel, when he knew that the writing was signed, went home, and in his upper room, with his windows opened towards Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks for his Yahuwah as he had done before. So there you go. 3 times a day, he's kneeling down. He's going to go pray. He's going to make sure that he's going to be able to serve Yahuwah. He's going to do his prayer 3 times a day. He's going to bow down. He's going to worship him. He's not going to be concerned that because he's doing what he's doing, he's going to be arrested and thrown in the lion's den. He doesn't care. He's going to make sure that he's not going to bow down to any other God except to Allah himself. Now we read from verses 16. Then the sovereign gave orders, and they brought Daniel, because now what happens in the meantime? They tell him that Daniel, who is one of the sons of the exile from Yehudah. So look at verse 13. Then they answered and said before the sovereign, Daniel, who is one of the sons of the exile from Yehudah, pays no heed to you, O sovereign, nor for the interdict that you have signed, but makes his petitions 3 times a day. Then the sovereign, when he heard these words, was greatly displeased with himself, and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him, and he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. So now imagine, he signs this decree, but he doesn't realize that this is a plot and a scheme against Daniel, because they were trying to get him out, because Daniel was amongst, he was above the governors and the viceroys, and they plotted and planned against him. And so they were trying to have him thrown out. And yet the king had favor with him. He had favor with the king. The king really respected and honored Daniel, because he knew Daniel already from what had done. He'd interpreted dreams already from the time of Nebuchadnezzar, that was serving the allure of Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel. And now here comes this king, and now he's put in a difficult place, because he has actually spoken this decree. Then it says, and then these men, so let's look at verse 16. Then the sovereign gave orders, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the den of the lions. But the sovereign spoke and said to Daniel, listen to what the sovereign says. So the king turns around and says to Daniel, your Allah, whom you serve continually, he himself delivers you. So imagine, what faith did this king have in the Yah of Daniel, that he says, don't worry, Daniel, your Allah will deliver you. He's going to deliver you. And the stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the sovereign sealed it with his own signet and with his signet of his great men, and the situation concerning Daniel might not be changed. And the sovereign went to his place and spent the night fasting. Understand, this king is fasting for Daniel, because he knows that he has been deceived by these men. But yet look at the faith and the trust that he has in the Yahuwah in the allure of Daniel. Look at the faith that he has in him. And the sovereign went to his place and spent the night fasting, and no entertainment was brought before him, and his sleep fled from him. So he spent the night fasting, praying. He didn't want to have any entertainment. He didn't even sleep. Then the sovereign rose up very early the morning and hurried to the den of the lions. You understand, there will be those that will help us and deliver us, and they will be there, because it says, even though the enemy is going to fight against us, the Father's going to raise up for himself a remnant people that are going to have to help his people in this time. And this remnant of people that have been faithful to him, that keep his charge, that keep his ways, he's going to use them to be able to do mighty and great exploits. He will. That's just the way I see it. Because at the end of the day, there are some that are going to have to die, but there are others that are going to have to help his people to be able to bring in the greatest harvest. And when he came to the den, he called with a grieved voice to Daniel. The sovereign spoke and said to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living Allah, has your Allah, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions? Then Daniel said to the sovereign, O sovereign, live forever. My Allah has sent his messenger. Who's the messenger? Yahushua, the messenger that was with them in the lion's den. Oh, the Father's going to send us. Yahushua is going to come, and he is going to help us in many occasions. And my Yahuwah has sent his messenger and shut the lion's mouth, and they did not harm me, because I was found innocent before him, and also before you, O sovereign. I have done no harm. Then the sovereign was very glad, and gave orders that Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no harm was found on him, because he trusted in his Yahuwah. So do you see what I'm saying? There's going to be times that we are going to trust him, and he's going to see us through in the most mighty, powerful way if we put our trust in him. And there's going to be in other circumstances where he's going to allow us to go through certain things, and we are going to have to believe, just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, even if he doesn't answer our prayer, we are not going to bow down our need to these things. And if we make the decision not to do that, I mean, the Father is really opening up to me the book of Revelation, and I do believe that there's going to come a day when I'm going to be able to really share a lot of things from the book of Revelation and be able to understand the things that are going on as the time unfolds. We will be able to see the things of the book of Revelation unfolding itself before our very eyes. And so we see here, praise Abba, that just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that was a witness for ABBA YAWHUAH, so was Daniel a witness for ABBA YAWHUAH. We are called not to fear, but to be witnesses for Yahushua, even unto death. We are called to be his witnesses. We read that right in the beginning in Isaiah 43. We are called to be his witnesses. We are called to stand. We are called to be a witness for him. So let's go look. No, we didn't read it. Are we going to read it now? Isaiah 43 verses 10 to 12. Let's go to Isaiah 43. Isaiah. Understand, they knew that they were in this difficult, but because they were obedient, you see, you need to understand something. It's only going to be the obedience to the Father. It's not going to be because we're going to demand and command. It's going to be our obedience to the Father. Remember, it was in the obedience that they were thrown in the lion's den, that the obedience by them throwing in the lion's den to say, we will not bow down to this, that then they saw the deliverance. It was in the obedience that Daniel would not bow down to the system that he was then put, and the obedience is what brought the deliverance in the end. So you see, it's the suffering. When Yeshua learned obedience through his suffering. So by them having to suffer, being thrown in the lion's den, that was a suffering. But in the obedience that they did not bow down, that's where the deliverance came. In the obedience, because Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did not bow down to the statue, then because of that, they were delivered. So what I'm saying is, there's not going to be this thing where people say, when we are going to be obedient to the Father and to his word and to what he tells us to do, that's where our deliverance is going to be. That is the time in where we're going to see the deliverance. But there's not this thing of where people just think that, you know what, we're just going to be delivered. It's in if you've seen here, it took obedience to his word, where they did not bow. So when we do not bow down to the things of the world, it is there that we are going to see the greatest deliverance of the Father. And in some cases, that deliverance is going to have to take that we're going to have to die. Eventually, as the disciples had to die for the witnessing of their faith, we might just have to die for the witnessing of our faith. And these are the things that we need to be reminded of. Because in Isaiah chapter 43 verse 10, and it says, Isaiah chapter 43 verses 10 to 12 says, you are my witnesses, because at the end of the day, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had to be witnesses. They were witnesses for ABBA YAWHUAH. And we are called to fear him and to be witnesses for him. So here we read, you are my witnesses, declares Yahuwah, and my servant whom I have chosen, so that you know and believe me and understand that I am he. Before me there was no other El formed, nor after me there is none. I am Yahuwah, and besides me there is no Savior. I have declared and saved and made known, and there was no foreign mighty one among you, and you are my witnesses, declares Yahuwah, that I am El. That's it. End of story. That is what he's speaking right now. We are to be his witnesses, declares Yahuwah, the servant whom he has chosen, so that we believe in him and understand that it is he and he alone. Before me there was no El formed, nor after me there is none. I am Yahuwah, and besides me there is no Savior. Because the only Savior that there is there was the Savior of Yahushua Mashiach, and the Father and the Son are one. I have declared and saved and made known, and there was no foreign mighty one among you, and you are my witnesses, declares Yahuwah, that I am Eloah. So Father is going to raise up those that are going to have to be witnesses for him, that are going to have to be witnesses for him in this time of the greatest destruction that is going to come. We are going to have to stand. We are not going to bow down to the systems of this world. We are not going to bow down for anything. We are going to have to understand that we will rather suffer if we have to suffer, and whatever it is that we go through, from there we are going to see the greatest miracles. So now we're going to look at we're going to go back to Peter, as we're going to have to look at what the Bible tells us about the fact that we are called to suffer. So that will be the next session that I'm going to be able to bring, is the next session of where we need to understand that we are called to have to suffer.